long story short, you made Choo-Choo Charles, and it just completely blew up. So that's my intro for you, but I wanted you to go ahead and just give everybody an idea of who you are and what you've done, what you're working on, what you've worked on.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much, sums it up. So I've been making games I just hit the 10-year mark recently. Started when I was 12. I've been making games for PC, for mobile, mostly PC lately. I published a bunch of random stuff that nobody's heard of, and then recently did Choo-Choo Charles, which went pretty viral just all across the internet with gameplay videos and the trailers, and I did a devlog series for it on my YouTube channel, which also did pretty well and gained a lot of attention for the game. Released it last December, so about a year ago now, and did very well. It met and slightly exceeded expectations, my own expectations, and yeah, it did well. It did well. So now I'm kind of at this point just working on console porting, working on a new game, and that's about it.
Well,
yeah.
I have a question for you. So before we started this call, I was thinking, me and my wife are watching Lord of the Rings. Have you seen Lord of the Rings?
I have.
Okay,
yeah.
I know you. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 22.
Yeah, so you're 22. So I wasn't sure, considering I don't think it was out when you were like. I think it came out before you were born. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were watching it, and you watch Gandalf the Grey, and then he dies, and then spoiler alert, he comes back as Gandalf the White. And I kind of feel like you've entered that Gavin the White phase of game development, which is you did something that no one else, I would say probably nobody in this listening to this podcast knows where you're at, because you were that successful with your game. Do you feel like you've kind of do you feel like you've entered a realm that no one can really understand? Is it a lonely place to be?
It's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. Yeah, it's a weird one, right? Because it's like, I feel like if I say yes, which I would, it does sound a little cocky. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, it's not cocky. It's just no one can understand what it's like to do as well as you did with launching this game. It was just in terms of just the quality of the game. Like, it's not even about the success of the game, just the quality. Like, so many game developers, they struggle to reach that level of quality. And have you found it difficult to communicate with other game developers or just friends in your life about kind of what it's like to be in your shoes now? Is that
Yeah, so basically there's like two people in my life, two friends that are also game developers, and a couple of them are also pretty successful. They're in a similar kind of situation to myself, and so for them, they're able to relate to it, and it's easier to talk with them about that kind of stuff, just like, because there's so many things that you don't expect and that you don't really take into account when you're just making games, and then all of a sudden when you've got something that people have actually played, it is a bit different. As far as like people like in my personal life, I just don't talk about it much. I'm just like, I'm chilling. I
think that's wise, dude, because it's just like I don't know, like you could piss people off really quick if all you talk about is how successful you've been.
Or like, oh, my job is so hard.
Yeah. But it
people
is
don't
hard.
like to hear that much.
Isn't it true though? Isn't it true, Gavin, though, that your job is difficult? Like
it's difficult in a different kind of way.
So what is
it's
that?
Like, I'm not hauling bricks. Well, there's a lot of people, that they're hauling bricks. They're doing physically difficult, strenuous things. They are very tired at the end of the day. That's a difficult kind of job. The stuff that I'm doing, I'm sitting in front of a computer for, however many hours a day. And analyzing markets for months on end and doing all kinds of different research and programming and stuff. And it's like, a lot of people, they look at that and they're like, well, you're just sitting at a computer all day. You're making video games. That's a fun job. What are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
That's not hard.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's very difficult to explain to people that haven't done it. And since, I mean, a lot of the people watching this probably are game developers, they kind of, they get what we're talking about just through like the production side of things.
Sure.
Just where stuff is,
Sure.
It's always more difficult than it looks. You know, we all make it look easy.
Well, I know you do. And I think that we'll talk all about why when I watch your devlogs or when I just observe you from a distance, it seems so easy how you make games. Like you're so fast and you're a solo developer, yet you basically made a AA looking game. So we'll talk all about that production side. One final question about this though. Is there an emotional side to game development? Because you mentioned production side is difficult. Just the sitting at a desk and building a house of cards and the constant stress of the game breaking and deadlines and all that, right? Juggling 10 different skills at once, creating this world. So that's all difficult. But do you feel a pressure? Do you feel a pressure to make something like Choo-Choo Charles again? To make a game that has virality? And do you feel that kind of pressure?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so it's like there's definitely an emotional side to game development, just to start off. It's, you know, when you're working, because I think the main thing, at least for me, is when you make a plan, you make a schedule, you think you know what your game is, and you work on it for 5 months, and then all of a sudden you realize what you thought your game was is awful, and now you need to change it. And then you have to spend like a week completely reframing your mindset and all of your plans and goals and schedule that you've laid out years ahead, and completely refactor that. And that's just something that you have to do like every few months, and just trying to, you know, meeting expectations, pressure from, you know, with Choo-Choo Charles, it was kind of a unique scenario because people wanted it ahead of launch. So there was a bit of, you know, pressure from players and stuff. Yeah. And I mean, now that game is out and I'm working on a new project, it's definitely one of these things where it's like, you know, I don't want to be a one-hit wonder. Like, I want to make more successful games that are as big or bigger than Choo-Choo Charles. And, you know, trying to, I don't know, that's been one of those things that I've been trying to figure out just recently, even, you know, like trying to figure out like where I need to like be getting my motivation from, because like a lot of me is still really focused on Charles and the success that I had with that, and it's almost difficult to let go of that and just get onto a new project that I can fully commit to, just because it's like such a big risk working on something completely different and new. So yeah, there's always some weird sort of emotional stuff going on with game development.
In terms of the motivation for your next game, and yeah, dude, if you don't want to talk about this, we can cut it, but like in terms of the motivation, do you find yourself thinking, whatever I create, I want it to be as good as Choo-Choo Charles, as opposed to the initial reasons why you made games, which is I just want to make a game that I like? Do you find yourself in a different situation than you used to be in?
A little bit. I mean, I've always been focused on, you know, trying to make games that lots of people enjoy and that lots of people want to play. You know, and I mean, that was a focus on Choo-Choo Charles, right? And, you know, that hasn't changed, but I think there probably is a little more pressure on just the side of like, I need to top Charles. And it's like it is kind of one of these things where like the longer I make games, the more it moves away from hobby into job. And you know, obviously like that's fully self-imposed. I could just make games that like I would, you know, that I would want to play all day. I could do that, but it's just, I don't know, I've just kind of decided that going the route of like, you know, just making stuff, because I don't know, I enjoy when people like what I'm making. When people are all hyped for it, when people are all on board, they're playing it. That's probably the most rewarding thing for me. So, yeah.
And I think that's oddly, I think that's a perspective that most game developers don't have. Because what you just said is, essentially you said the pure version of, I want to make a game that people want to buy. You know, like...
I mean, pretty much, yeah.
But at the end of the day, to make a game that people want to buy means that... Or to make a game that's marketable, AKA that means you're making a game that people want. And there's a part of you, and I think this is a good thing, there's a part of you that wants to make something for people as opposed to for yourself. And I think a lot of game developers, they get so stuck in the mindset of creating something for themselves. The problem with that is that yourself and your desires change throughout the 2-year development process. So you can never please yourself, so you're always adding crap that you shouldn't be adding. You know what I mean?
True. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's like, it's kind of one of these things where when you're making games for other people, it's almost like you never fully have that like Goldilocks period where you're just completely infatuated with what you're creating, but you never get to the point of like purely despising it. So it's like a little bit more of an even experience throughout development, emotionally, I guess.
Yeah.
It is a different way of approaching things, I suppose. I think
I think in a weird way, it's a purer way to make games. The older I get, the more I'm like, if I make this game, if the initial impetus of this game is to be profitable, I'll be in a better headspace because I'll treat it more like it's a business, more like it's a product, and it won't consume me. It won't become my baby. It won't become my obsession, but rather it's just a project as if I was a business owner, right? Same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the initial, because you've grown so much since when you started. So let's go all the way back to the beginning of production. This is going to be more of I would love it to be a more technical conversation about the tools you used and how you made this game, because I look at it and I'm like, I was pretty frustrated, to be completely honest with you, when I first saw it, because I was thinking, how did he do this? I mean, I think you started it when you were 19, right?
Yeah, that was like when I first kind of came up with the concept.
So yeah, take me back to the beginning and just tell me the story of making this thing.
Yeah, so let's see here. So first thing, I guess I'll just quickly go over the tools that I use just for reference for everybody. So I use Unreal Engine 4 for Choo-Choo Charles. I'm now on Unreal Engine 5, it's basically the same thing for anybody wondering. I use GIMP for all of my 2D art, and then I use Blender for any custom 3D stuff that I have.
What's your 2D art, by the way, just for clarity?
Yeah. So 2D art, that's going to be anything like marketing materials, poster art, stuff like that, or texture art.
Okay.
So what I did with a lot of Choo-Choo Charles in order to kind of set apart the style, because I think that, just having just a unique art style it's good for your branding, and it's good for, a game's recognizability. So what I do is when I download assets, which is something that I do a lot in order to speed up development, I'll take the textures, throw them into GIMP. I've got like one of those like digital sketch pads, and I'll draw over the textures. Just real quick, just kind of a nice scribbly style. The scribbly style kind of helps feed into the horror aspect, so it's a little rougher around the edges and makes it a little bit quicker to actually execute.
Mm-hmm.
So scribble over those, bring them back into the editor, and boom, and then you got a retextured asset. But in any case, so that's like kind of what the 2D side of stuff looks like. So from a production standpoint, I think one of the main things was the pre-production on Choo-Choo Charles was very fast. It was very, very fast, rushed even. At the time, I was in a situation where I kind of needed a game idea quick, and I needed to announce a game quick, because I didn't have any income, and my best bet for income at the time was making another game. So I spent probably about 2 weeks concepting the game, trying to think of unique characters that I could throw in there, some fun gameplay with like an easy enough to make gameplay loop. And so after 2 weeks, I had a pretty solid idea of like kind of the foundation of the game. Like I didn't have a full list of all the missions that I wanted, for example. I didn't have a full list of all the different guns that I wanted. But I knew that I should have a handful of different guns that you could get from missions. I knew that I should have a couple of required missions. And I knew that there should be a spider train.
Did you know?
Train tracks.
Sorry to interrupt you. Did you know if
Sure.
Were you using a kit or a template, and then you could find yourself to that Unreal template? And for those of you listening, but what I mean by template is like Unreal offers a first-person shooter template. They offer a third-person template. Did you confine yourself when you were creating this idea? Did you confine yourself to a template?
Sort of. I mean, I used what did I use? Well, actually, technically, so what I used was a first-person template that wasn't made by Unreal. It was sort of an asset. It was meant to be like a high mobility character controller that had like vaulting and crouching and a whole bunch of stuff.
Kind of like a Doom style character.
Not exactly. It was just like it was more like a parkour character.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But as development went on, I just ended up stripping out most of that stuff down to the point where it was basically just the default Unreal Engine character controller.
Cool.
Just for like a first-person kind of game. So most of the systems were kind of built from the ground up. It's just that a lot of the systems are pretty simple. So things like the inventory, interaction systems, stuff like that.
So you mentioned the spider. So you mentioned, and
yes.
you ended your sentence earlier. You said, and I wanted a spider train. Now I hope you don't gloss over that, because that's why this game is wild. I mean, I don't want to discredit your ability to create a great game that looks beautiful, but the spider train is why. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why the game was wildly successful.
That's why it was viral. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Which was needed, right? I mean, do you need that virality?
It's crucial.
Okay.
Absolutely. If you don't have that, then you get no marketing.
So,
and that's a problem.
I mean, did you just? You don't have to tell me where you came up with the idea. Maybe you found it on Creepypasta on Reddit. I don't know. Or did you just wake up one night and like Spider Train? Like, can you give us a background of how that idea came about? Because that to me is like you just stumbled upon a gold mine. And it's just a simple idea, but that idea exploded your career.
Right. So for me, I was trying to think of ways, because I was seeing kind of this trend, and it's become a very popular trend in horror these days, to the point where a lot of people are actually pretty sick of it. But at the time, this trend didn't really exist. It wasn't a widespread thing that people knew about. So I had noticed that games like Five Nights at Freddy's or Bendy and the Ink Machine were taking characters that were kind of nostalgic, and then they would put them in a horror context. So with Five Nights at Freddy's, you're taking these pizzeria animatronics. It's a nostalgic location, these sort of like creepy, animatronics that you'd see in like Chuck E. Cheese.
Right.
They've got those in there as well. And so I was trying to think of things that most people would have been familiar with as kids that I could turn into a spooky character.
Right.
And so I was realizing, there's really not that many horror games based on kids' TV shows. And so for me, my favorite TV show when I was growing up was Thomas the Tank Engine. So what I did, I was like, well, I'll just take Thomas. Take Thomas, make him spooky, make him scary, make him evil. And as I was trying to figure out a good character design for that, how I could, really pull that off, there's this animator on YouTube and TikTok called Tom Coben, and he did these really cool animations that went viral, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years back, where it was Thomas the Tank Engine with like spider legs and this big snake head and stuff. I was like, I could take the spider leg aspect from that. Yeah. Pair it up with, this kind of a creepy clown demon looking face.
Yep.
And I could have a pretty cool design. So that's where the design for it came from. It's just taking something that people would be kind of familiar with.
Yeah.
And then just going crazy with it. So
yeah, I think that's brilliant.
Really
I think that is brilliant, and I think that I'm doing that with Twisted Tower, with like all the different creepy characters you meet in this theme park. We're giving this sort of creepy Disney vibe, and of course you're definitely an inspiration. And we'll probably see a ton of games that come out that have that. I guess you'd call it corrupt TV show or corrupt children's characters in the game. So it's nothing new at this point, but you're right. You were on the cusp of it. Cool. So you had that idea. So what was next?
Yeah, so at that point, so that was really what I kind of based the game around. Mm-hmm. So when I knew that, okay, spooky trains were going to be involved, I figured, well, it'd be fun to drive around on a train. So I was like, okay, well, I have to have a train that you can drive around in. And then in order to make that more engaging and feel like a more personal experience, I was like, okay, well, I'll throw in some upgrades, throw in some custom weapons. Maybe you can color your train. Gotta mention, coloring the train was probably one of the best features that I added to the game.
Really?
I swear, this is obviously a little bit of an exaggeration, but like probably half of the sales that the game got were just people that wanted to color the train.
What? Can you explain that? I'm sorry.
Analytics.
Can you go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry,
sure.
I don't want to interrupt you. I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So I'll get back to your thought in a second. But I was looking at my YouTube analytics, trying to figure out what my most viewed YouTube video was of all time. And at first I was like, oh, hey, here's the trailer, which had like 5 million views. And I was like, well, I guess that's it. And then I remembered I've got a bunch of shorts on YouTube, which is sort of like the TikTok competitor.
Yeah.
But on YouTube. And so I realized my most viewed video on all of YouTube is a 20-second video where I show people all the different colors that they can put on their train. Paint colors. So you can recolor it to be blue or green or black or white or whatever. And that video has 5.5 million views. And it's just me showing the different colors of the train. So a lot of people really liked that one. But in any case, so your question was...
My question was, I want you to... can you break down... I don't want to derail you here with your story about the creation of the game. This is so important to me because we've been thinking about doing customization for Twisted Tower, like being able to customize the color scheme of your character so that the guns you carry are a specific color. Why do you feel like that's why the game was more profitable? Does it have to do with streamers? Do you know what I'm asking?
I don't know if it's streamers specifically. But I think a big part of it is just it feels personal. Yeah. You know? Like if you can make it feel a little bit more personal to the players and then you give them some of that no matter what it might be. Like if it's, recoloring your your guns, skins for your guns and stuff like that. I mean that's how a lot of games make most of their revenue, is by having gun skins.
Okay,
like
but
that.
you didn't do in-app purchases or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
It's all free. So the way that I have it set up is that the different colors are just collectibles. Yeah. So if you can find
go ahead.
the different colors, then you can add them to your train.
Cool. So the reason I bring this up as it correlates to streamers is because the game is. I don't think this is a surprise to you or me, but like the game is fairly short, right? It's a solo game, and you made a game that's pretty short. I think it's like 2-3 hours, 4 maybe.
Yeah, 3-4 hours for like an average playthrough.
Yeah, so it's a short game, and it's not super variable. Like you can choose which path you want to go down, but it's not like you can change the story, right?
Starts in the same place, ends in the same place.
So it's not linear, but if you look at point A to point to the end, it's not that variable. Point being, if a streamer's playing this game and it's got 1 million views because it's got that viral aspect to it, that is not necessarily enough to make a successful game. You've got to add that extra ingredient, which is the viewers watch the video or the stream and they say, I want to play that, but I want to do it my way. And if you're getting, this is just a suspicion, so correct me if I'm wrong, the goal is, okay, if I don't have a game that's super variable, where it's procedurally generated or the player has a ton of creative control, let me at least give them one tiny creative element that has high value. So in this case, being able to create a pink train that has high value, despite the fact that it is meaningless on the gameplay side, but it's hilarious, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I mentioned streamers, because I'm like, people they see a stream and then they want to do their version of that stream. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would definitely agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, that's great, dude. That is such good insight, because those of you listening, I think that it's definitely important to think, what can I add that's high value that takes very little time? And so being able to color the train, I mean, how long did that take you to create that mechanic?
Oh, probably a solid half a day. Maybe 2.
I was expecting you to say half a month. Oh, great. Yeah, half a day. Man, dude, that's incredible. Okay, cool. So let's get back to your story.
Yeah, so let's see. So where were we? We're talking design, pre-production. Yeah, so just kind of figuring out what all the game mechanics, like all the foundational mechanics should be. So figured out that I should have, trains, upgrades, guns, and a bunch of different side missions in an open world, and that you'd be chased down by a spider train. So pretty much I decided, okay, these are the confines that I'm going to work within, and I'm going to stick to this because I think this is really solid. And all the, figuring out how the individual missions are going to work, figuring out specifically how the AI is going to function, figuring out exactly how the game is going to end, things like that I'll figure out as I go over time throughout development, rather than trying to spend 3 months in pre-production just, kind of wasting time, walking around, figuring out how this stuff is going to work. So what I did was I quickly, in the first month of development, my goal was to create a trailer and screenshots and a description of the game that I could use to launch a Steam page and the game trailer, and kind of gauge interest to start gaining Wishlist so I could start taking part in online events and stuff like that. So I launched the trailer at the first day of October in 2021 or 2 or something, I don't know. And so that blew up, got a lot of traction. And then from that point, it was just production time. It was just time to really focus in on building out all of the systems.
Do you mind if I ask a question about this?
Sure.
Did you have you say when you said earlier, I figured that I needed weapons, I needed a train, I needed to be able to color my train. Was this all just written down, or was it a prototype?
Yeah, so this is just written down.
Okay, so you did a GDD?
In the first couple of weeks, it was just... Yes, yeah, absolutely. You need a GDD. Everyone watching, you need a GDD. If you're working on any project larger than a game jam game, you need a game design document. Organize your thoughts, organize your ideas, keep track of what you're doing, and make notes. It's important.
Did you have the game loop written down as exactly how it worked?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Game loop looked like, drive train to new location, do a mission, get an upgrade, drive to a new location, that kind of stuff.
Okay. One more question, and then we can move on to the production side if you're cool with that.
Sure.
Well, 2 questions. How long did the GDD take you?
2 weeks.
Okay.
For the initial, kind of foundation of it. Right. I started production after about 2 weeks.
So day 0 is no idea at all? Or day 0 is, actually, I have all the ideas in my head, and then I'm going to write it out for 2 weeks?
I think day 0 was, I want to make a game about a spider train. So
Gotcha.
once that idea came up, that's kind of when I considered the start of pre-production, when I started kind of trying to flesh out what I could create around this concept.
So the way it works for me is there's 20 different ideas ping-ponging around in my head at all times for new game ideas. And the skill of capturing or figuring out which idea is going to be the best idea, that skill is few and far between. Most game developers have 30 ideas in their head, and they tend to pick the one that for some reason it doesn't scare them as much, it seems doable, or they understand it, but they don't pick the game idea that's actually going to be successful or profitable. What was the process like of deciding that, or understanding that this idea would work? Did you know it would work? Was it like obvious to you? Spider Train, this is going to blow up.
I'm gonna say I didn't know it would blow up, but I felt like it hit a lot of the right marks. Mm-hmm. It did way better than I was anticipating. Kind of when I was first thinking through the concept, I was like, this seems like a game that could make, like, I was like, this could make a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
Like, this seems possible. Like, it seems like it could be a, one of these kind of mid-level, successful, profitable sort of games. And it did much better. But I think for the most part, it was kind of just an intuition at that point, because like I wasn't expecting it to be quite this big at all, but I was like, okay, it seems like an interesting concept. This seems like a funny thing that people would talk about a bit, and that people would maybe share with their friends.
Yeah.
And it was that and a lot more, which I didn't quite anticipate.
So it was just this instinct,
I guess. I think it just comes from making games for as long as I have, and having published a lot of games. That's the other thing.
How many had you published?
I think at that point, like 8 or something like that.
There you go.
So I had a lot of data points. I kind of knew all the things that didn't work at that point.
Yeah.
And that's something that just comes with time.
Okay.
A lot of time and a lot of releases.
So is it fair for me to say that it's not instinct, it's just a muscle that you practiced and exercised?
I mean, I guess. Yeah. It's a developed instinct.
Yeah. Have you ever had a game that was viral prior to this one?
Not really. Mm-hmm. So the game that I made just before Choo-Choo Charles, well, the commercial game that I'd made right before Choo-Choo Charles was My Beautiful Paper Smile.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like a 2.5D point-and-click horror game.
Mm-hmm.
And it got around 20 million views on YouTube across like all the gameplay videos.
Yeah.
Didn't go particularly viral. It's like it did well, like by indie game standards. It did well above, average. Mm-hmm. But it still wasn't really profitable. I had a publisher involved, and it took a really long time to make. I spent like 4 years on that game. So factoring everything in, it didn't really pan out how I wanted it to. But yeah, so it wasn't exactly viral, but it got a little bit of attention. So it kind of got me on the right path.
So did you feel like any of these previous games you had made, and just for people who are curious, for me, I've made 3 commercial releases and then like 5 small games that weren't commercial. And so I'm in a similar boat as Gavin. I just haven't had the massive viral success that you've had. But point being, do you feel like it's true that game developers, they need to embrace their failed projects, and they've got to just treat it as battle scars?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of people, when they first get into development, they want to make their first game a hit game. They want to go all in on their first one because they're like, I'm going to give this game the best chance that I can. I'm going to put all my savings into it, or I'm going to get a publisher involved, or I'm going to get investors, and I'm going to do all this stuff to try and give this game the best chance it possibly can. And then it fails because that's just what it does. Working on your first games, it should be mostly just about releasing the game. It should just be about putting something out and putting yourself through the experience, because there's always a lot of things involved in the process that you would have no idea about your first time around. And like putting any amount of money behind a project that you don't know anything about is a pretty risky bet. It's like if you've been doing it for 10 years and you published a bunch of games, then you're kind of at the point where, if you've kind of developed some of these intuition, some of these muscles where you can kind of start to see how certain things could align and work out. At that point, you could start putting some money behind projects that you're really confident in. Yeah. But early on, it's just about getting games out, trying out different things, getting new data points, and starting to kind of hone in those skills. It's a long, if you're getting into game development, it's a long process. Yeah. You're playing it's a marathon. It's not about making one hit and then retiring.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like
bare
that.
minimum, I agree with you, man. I think bare minimum, you need to at least release one crappy game just to know what it feels like, because a lot of people, they can't handle the critique or the criticism or the trolling of comments, let's say on itch.io, or if they do a devlog on YouTube about the game. You got to accept that people are going to be nasty. And once you can get over that, and you can get over the idea that you're not the best game developer, that you have a long road ahead of you, once you can accept that, then you can just start having fun. Then it's just fun. You don't have to be scared.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen this trend among a lot of game developers that I talk to, which is the successful ones, they've just released so many games. And they've figured out what their forte is. And if you don't mind, one final thing before we discuss production, what do you feel like your forte is that you've discovered over these 8 games? What's the talent that you feel like you were gifted with?
Yeah, I think it is a tough one, honestly. Mm-hmm. I think kind of by default it would be just kind of art and aesthetics. I think that's what I've been good at from the youngest age, and I'm obviously I'm not the best at it. I'm not a 10 out of 10 pro or anything like that, but that's probably where my skills lie most naturally. And that's what I leaned into a lot with my earlier games.
Is it a aesthetic with your eye or with your hand? And what I mean by that is, do you have an art skill with your hands that you can create stuff from scratch, or is it that you have a really good eye, meaning you're resourceful with assets?
I think both.
Yeah. Okay. So you're a good illustrator.
It's like I have the. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I would definitely say so.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, I was gonna say that's probably what I was thinking. What if I was to give Gavin one forte? It would definitely be aesthetic and atmosphere and just something that's pretty. Like, I think the reason why the game was wildly successful is because with using Unreal, using assets, you figured out how to create something that catches people's attention. That Choo-Choo Charles face it's like every single one of your thumbnails on YouTube, and rightfully so. It should be, because it's so clicky. You just want to see more. So let's talk about that production side, about creating this terrifying train. What were the tools you used? How did you create this stuff? I know you mentioned Unreal and
Yep.
GIMP and stuff like that, but let's talk about the production side of this. You had your GDD, spent 2 weeks on your GDD. What was the production like?
Yeah, so the production, so it started out with just kind of putting together this sort of, I would call it like a visual prototype. Just enough gameplay, just enough features to create that initial announcement trailer. Mm-hmm. So the process there was really, I was just trying to do stuff as quick as possible, really basic programming and stuff like that. So I started out by just trying to figure out the train system. So I hopped into Unreal Engine. I started working with splines and started creating kind of just a train track system.
What's a spline?
That would allow me... A spline? Great question, Thomas. A spline is when you take 2 or more points in space, so in your game space, mm-hmm. and you basically create a curve, like an interpolated curve between those 2 points, mm-hmm. so that you can create a smooth, waving, curving line. Mm-hmm. And then what you can do is you can attach objects or meshes, things like train tracks. In this case, you attach the train tracks to that spline so that it curves and waves all around whatever area.
So the mesh is not modular. It's not modular pieces that are snapping to a grid. Rather, it's
no.
Is it just straight pieces that are like 20 units long, or is it literally building the mesh procedurally based on the spline?
It's sort of a mix of both. So I've got a static track mesh that I've got. And then in Unreal Engine, you can just snap that mesh to the spline, and then that just kind of curves it.
Whoa.
And then it'll just loop that mesh all the way along the spline, and you get this nice curving mesh that goes all the way around.
How did that feel when you made that, dude?
You put together. Oh, great. It was awesome. I mean, that was one of, just the train track system alone was one of the most, complicated things I've had to program. Just Choo-Choo Charles in general was just a massive step up in the complexity of the stuff that I had to program, all the gameplay stuff. Because previously I'd just done like really simple like walking simulator type stuff. These really linear story-based games where I was really leaning into the story and atmosphere. So the programming was stuff that I didn't really understand much.
Yeah.
So getting to put together stuff like this was pretty cool.
Okay. So let's give our audience here, let's give them an idea of what they're capable of. Okay. So let's try and be as honest as we can. Do you feel like anybody could create this spline system, or are you uniquely suited as a solo developer? Are you smart with math? Are you smart with coding? Did you use blueprints? Did you use C++? Are you uniquely suited to create this system? Because I look at this game and I go, I wish I could say everybody could create something like this, but I think Gavin's special. I think he's a wizard. What do you think?
I wouldn't say special. I think just that, I don't know, oddly dedicated and willing to be beat up by a computer. I guess that'd be a decent summary.
That's good. I like that.
I mean, I think pretty much anybody, if they really put their mind to it, they could create a similar system, like for the track itself. Just the tracks, looping into each other and a train that follows that.
Yeah. Blueprints
it's
or
not
C++?
all that complicated. Blueprints.
Okay,
100%.
so you did all this with visual scripting.
By the way, yes, the entire game. I've never used C++ in my life, and I want to make a note on this real quick because this is a misconception that I see way too much in the game industry, and I've been thinking about it lately, and I'm like, dang, I need to get the word out about this because this is ridiculous. So here's the deal. With Unreal Engine, a lot of people have this misconception that you can only do a handful of things in Blueprint. They think, oh, well, yeah, you can do some basic prototyping in Blueprint, but for anything complicated, you have to use C++. Right. And there's a lot of information online that would seemingly reinforce this. So if you're a beginner using Unreal, you'll be looking up, okay, how do I make a train spline system or something like that? Or how do I snap a spline to another spline or whatever you're looking for? It could be any number of thousands of different problems or systems that you're trying to build. You'll go onto Reddit, you'll go onto the Unreal forums, and you'll always see people in the comments saying, well, that's impossible to do in Blueprint. But here's how you do it in C++. And they'll show you how to do it in C++, but they'll tell you that it's impossible to do in Blueprint. I have read the phrase, that's impossible to do in Blueprints. I've read that thousands of times, and it has never been true.
Yeah. Never
true. There's always either, maybe there's a function that does the same thing, but it goes by a different name in Blueprint as opposed to C++. Maybe rather than being something that you do in Blueprint, there's a different kind of asset that you use to do that function.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a free plugin that you can download to get that functionality in Blueprint. There's always, like, unless you're making a AAA game or an advanced AA game, you can use Blueprint for everything.
Yeah.
Like, I want to put that out there.
I think it's a frustration that I think a lot of game developers who actually make games full time that we all share. The frustration being there's gatekeepers or there's like cult-like behavior about how to make games, the proper engine to, I mean, obviously Unity's really screwed up based on their pricing, but in terms of the engine itself, I love Unity. I think it's great, but there's pros and cons to all engines and the purpose you're going to use it for. Point being, though, I'm really into weight training as well. The same thing is true in the weight training community. There's always a right way to do stuff, and there's always a wrong way, and there's always somebody saying you can't do X, Y, and Z. But I've always said the people you should really be listening to are the people who have done it, and not only done it, but they do it full time and they're profitable doing it. Those are the people you should listen to. Everyone else on the forums and on Reddit and on social media who are just complaining or talking about how to do something, but they've never actually released anything. My theory is it's best to just take what they're saying with a grain of salt. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of those things that like you just got to get used to over time.
Yeah.
Just kind of getting better at. I mean, honestly, it's like until you've done the thing yourself, it's difficult to identify, who doesn't know what they're talking about. So yeah, it's always just one of these things where, yeah.
Well, here's the thing.
Like you said.
Here's the funny thing. You can make a game wrong and it be profitable.
Exactly.
I mean, if anybody was to crack open my game Pinstripe or Neversong or even Twisted Tower, which is our first 3D game, you're going to see a mess. Like, there's so much about our games that's just made wrong. And when I live stream, 25% of the comments, and it doesn't make me mad, but 25% of the comments are like, here's how you should do it, Thomas. And I'm like, I don't really care. We're making progress here, so we're good. So I just want to encourage everybody listening that there's a million ways to do something. So don't let the internet community tell you that you're stupid or you're not smart. Rather, just make progress. That's all you need to do. Make progress.
Yep, 100%.
Okay, so you made this track system. You were really impressed with yourself, and you did it with blueprints, and you didn't even use C++. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so at that point, it was a matter of putting the train together. Mm-hmm. So since I had to have a trailer for this, I needed some of the graphics to look final. So I took some time, a couple days, to put together this decent enough train model, the player train model. Drew up some textures for it in GIMP. I just did fully from scratch textures for that one since it wasn't based on an asset. So I just had to do those ones from scratch.
So you didn't use Substance to paint the train or anything.
No.
I mean, I'm the same way, dude. That's how I do it.
Something that I did wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know why, but I would rather open up a Photoshop, a UV map in Photoshop and paint inside of that. Like, as if I was like coloring on Christmas wrapping paper. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you fold it up over the box. That's how I prefer to do things, which is totally wrong. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just for an example here with how to do things the wrong way. So for the train model, for most of basically any custom model that I did in Choo-Choo Charles, there's always like 6 different materials that are applied to it. Mm-hmm. I just use the Blender Smart UV Unwrap.
Yeah.
And like, I don't even export the UV map. I make the texture first, I put it into Blender, and then I adjust the UV map within Blender,
dude,
to fit the it's messy, but it works at the end of the day. I released the game, so it's
oh man, but Gavin, I'm sure that encourages so many people listening right now that they're like,
I hope so.
I mean, because to be blunt with you, that is the most ridiculous way I've heard of of actually painting a model. And but the way my team does it, I have a 3D artist that his name is Felipe. He's really great. The way he does it is he does it the right way, and I put that in quotes because there's a million right ways to do things, but he'll actually export the blend model and then bring it into Substance and then paint it that way. But it doesn't matter because like when I look at Choo-Choo Charles, I look at a game that has a very unique flavor. It just looks like it's handcrafted, despite the fact that you used assets. And I'm curious, by the way, why did you choose to do a custom model for the train when you could have probably just downloaded something from TurboSquid?
I think partially I had some specific look and design needs for that train specifically. Like I knew that I needed like a walkable perch on the back of the train where the guns would be mounted, right? So that was a very specific thing that I needed. I needed a small interior that you could walk around. I needed a little dashboard with 3 levers on it to control it. And I had a specific kind of look that was similar to, like the trains in Thomas the Tank Engine and stuff like that. So that was one of those things that I just felt would be best to do custom so that it would really fit the branding that I was going for and the design needs. So that was the main thing there.
But you were willing to use assets for other stuff.
Yeah, for other stuff.
In terms of the emotional side of this, a lot of developers, they get cocky or they get too attached to their game, and so they're like, man, this train looks amazing. Well, then I need to model everything, and it needs to be my fingerprints all over this game. Did you have that temptation to do that?
Nope.
No?
Not at all.
So you're just lazy.
No. Exactly. I am. I'm lazy. I'm a fake developer. And
you're a fraud,
everybody
dude.
should review bomb me.
Yeah, that's right. No, so what assets, do you mind if I ask what assets or which things in your game were assets?
Sure.
That you flipped?
So, let's see here. So, it'd probably be easier to start with the things that aren't assets, honestly.
Sure.
So, all of the wooden buildings are modular pieces that I put together.
Oh.
That I created. So I created kind of a modular wooden building pack for myself.
Nice.
And I use that for all the wooden structures. The trains, I made the trains myself. I made the guns myself. And I think that's it. I think everything else is based on an asset. So the cave systems, any of the ruins, all the characters everybody probably knows are made in Fuse.
Yep. And that's what we're using as well.
See.
So
yeah.
Well, okay.
Hey,
so I should clarify
Fuse
that.
is great.
It is great. We started using Fuse based on your, I wouldn't call it advice. I just asked you what did you use, and you use Fuse. But I've also hired a contract worker to do custom costumes. So for example, we have like a creepy like Donald Duck costume and stuff like that. So he's creating that right now. But in terms of using Fuse, we're using it for like the NPCs and stuff. And
Gotcha.
It's great. If you know how to open up a Photoshop texture and edit it, I think that you can make these things look not like they're made in Fuse. Like you did, I believe you did that, right? With your characters, you made them look kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and you
originally
abandoned that.
I took all of the NPC textures and I retextured them to be kind of the same sketchy style as everything else in the game. But everybody hated it. Like when I was doing beta testing, one of the most common reports I'd get is like, yeah, for some reason there's this weird glitch on all the NPCs where their skin just looks all like a sketchbook or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, that everything looks like that though. What are you talking about?
Side note, this is exactly why it's important to at least have an audience available to you. It doesn't mean you have to be a YouTuber, but I did the same thing, man, where I posted an animated or a video on Twitter, and it was a video of gameplay in Twisted Tower, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I was so excited to share it with everybody, and it did really well. It got a lot of views, but I would say 30-40% of the comments were like, please remove the tilt when you move. It's making me nauseous.
Oh,
these things you just miss. These are things that could kill your game and give it a mostly positive or even a negative review on Steam if you didn't ask your audience or even just do an alpha test. Let's say you don't have an audience, you just want to do an alpha test. It's crucial because sometimes it's literally just one little pebble in your beautiful soil for your garden to grow. And that one little pebble you miss because for some reason you're just missing it. And it's up to your audience to help you find it. So I'm glad they found that for you because you kind of thought it was cool, right?
I did. I thought, hey, it kind of makes them look less like Fuse models.
Yeah.
Makes them fit into the game style more.
Yeah.
But people they weren't into it. So I ended up reverting it back to just the default Fuse textures. But yeah. So as far as the other asset stuff, I mean, the island itself, the island model, that was an asset. I had to edit it quite a bit, cut certain areas off, add certain areas in, and obviously all the buildings and structures and paths and everything had to be custom. But, you know, especially just for like making the initial trailer, just having just a base asset that I could kind of put everything around was useful just for speeding up that initial development and getting that visual prototype done.
Terrain tool in Unreal, did you use that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just use that for all of the terrain related stuff.
And like trees and foliage and all that. Just
yep,
downloaded from the what's the Unreal Asset Store called? Quixel?
The Unreal Marketplace, I think.
Oh, okay. What's Quixel? Is that
Quixel is another sort of marketplace. It's a library, I would say, that they have.
Kind of built
and
into
that's
the
just
engine.
all of their kind of, yeah. So it's you just go in there and they've got photo scans on there. So I didn't use any of those.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the marketplace came in handy for sure.
Okay. Now I know that your game, it seemingly relies heavily on post-processing to make it look as beautiful as it does. Is this correct?
No,
No,
it's not actually. I think
are the volumetrics not post-processing?
Well, in Unreal they're not post-processing. In Unreal, the volumetrics, that's a specific kind of it's an actor type, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I got you.
So it's classified a little bit differently. But I would say the volumetric fog, that is pretty cool though.
Oh
and,
yeah,
and it does add a lot to the atmosphere.
Okay.
The game would look very different without it.
What are some aspects of your game? What are some things that make the game eye-catching that you implemented? I'd love to know, because you're an artist.
Spider Train for one.
Sure. Spider Train, 100%. Great models, some of them custom, great use of assets and flipping assets. What are some things, though, like, for example, lighting, color, volumetrics, particle effects? What are some things that you really fine-tuned to make this thing eye-catching?
I mean, as far as the environment goes, I think the only thing would be probably largely the lighting and perhaps the color scheme.
Okay.
I'm trying to think here, because I never really did much in the way of just like posting like environment shots. Like anytime that you're seeing the environment, there's a train in the foreground, you know? Okay. So like the train is always the eye-catching piece, and the environment is more of a supporting sort of, it's a background, it's a backdrop.
So you're speaking from a marketing perspective right now, as opposed to gameplay, which is great. That's what I want to know. So to make this thing pop on social media, you didn't just rely on the environments, because every game can have a great environment.
Right, yeah. I mean, everybody has a forest. There's a lot of games with forests. It's pretty common at this point.
Yeah.
So I think the main thing is just having like above average light levels, so everything is easy to see. You know, it's not all dark and it's an important one. It's an important one. A lot of games you just can't see anything. It's like, what's the point of sharing a screenshot if you can't see it?
How do you make a spooky game that's light? What's the trick here?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So that's another one of these just kind of misconceptions about horror, is that horror isn't necessarily created through dark. It can be, but ultimately horror is about it's about threat and threat levels and unknown threats.
Okay.
So you can have a threat in broad daylight. If somebody runs up to you in broad daylight with a knife threatening to stab you, you'll probably be scared, despite the fact that it's not dark out.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and you can do the same thing in a video game. You can have a broad daylight video game that's very scary without darkness, just because there are other ways to build tension and fear. So Choo-Choo Charles does that just through, you know, being chased, chase scenes up tension a lot, and things like that. So
Okay.
yeah.
So you decided early on, or did you find out that dark shots weren't helping the marketing, or did you decide early on that you wanted to make this a brighter game?
Yes, that was an early decision.
Okay. So we've got our tools, right? We've got like
Right.
We've got our tools that are basically Unreal Engine using Blueprint. We've got Blender. We've got using Fuse, right? Let's move on to, unless I'm missing something here, can we move on to sound? Because the sound is great in the game.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you break down what you used for sound, including where you're sourcing some sounds, if you did source them?
Yes. Yeah, so most pretty much all the sounds used in the game are based off of sounds I got on freesound.org.
Wow.
And then the music I have in the game is all mostly custom music from a musician I hire, Tom Bellingham. He's awesome. He's really good. So for the sound effects, what I'll do is I'll have a sound in mind. Like, let's say I've got a drawbridge that falls down in a mission and it hits some wood planks, and I want to have a loud echoing sound as that drops down. So what I'll do is I'll do a screen recording of that action in game. First thing I do is, I create the scenario, I record it, and then I put that into a video editor. So I'll use either Premiere or sometimes I'll use Wondershare for my audio editing. Mm-hmm. And so then what I'll do is I'll go onto Freesound and I'll look around for, maybe a wood hit sound effect, or, maybe as the drawbridge is coming downwards, I'll have like a creaking wood, like, right. and then, so I'll grab like a creaky door sound effect or something like that. And then I'll just kind of splice them all together, do whatever pitch adjustments, reverb adjustments, things like that.
Did you mention the tool you're using for that?
Yeah, so I use usually just Wondershare.
Wondershare, I got you. Okay, I wasn't sure what Wondershare was. Okay, so that's...
it's a film editing software.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so what I do is I'll take the recording of the gameplay and I'll edit the audio right underneath that so I can see a live preview of how... Because sometimes you can create a sound that sounds good, but then when you match it up with the visuals, it's just off. It just sounds really off. And that's what I found.
Interesting.
What I do in order to fix that problem is I just edit the audio right next to the visuals so that I can feel it all in unison.
Okay.
And that is, that's my biggest trick when it comes to audio editing.
Okay.
So that's how I go about the sound effects.
Go ahead.
And then, and then for the music, I don't know, to be honest. I just take what sounds good. I don't have any better explanation than that.
Yeah. So you hire out this guy to do your music. Okay. So quick breakdown, and then we'll move into. I want to break down the tools just so everybody knows what you've used and how this game was created, and then we'll move on to the sort of wrap this up. I want everybody to kind of get an idea of how launch went, what it was like.
Sure.
So to break down the tools, and then I'll also give alternatives because I'll mention, Twisted Tower, it has a similar look. It's not as beautiful as your game, but it has a similar look. But
I don't know about that. Personally, I like it quite a bit.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. It's got a similar flavor, except we do a lot of interiors. And the reason I say that is because I want to show everybody that you can get a similar look with completely different tools, because Gavin's using Unreal Engine Blueprint, or blueprints, whatever, is it plural or not?
Same thing.
Yeah, same thing. And then Wondershare for the sound, freesound.org for sound sourcing, and Blender, and then also GIMP. It's funny because only one of these tools, I would say two of these tools, we're using. Everything else is completely different. We do use Freesound, but we primarily actually use Artlist.io now, which is a paid service. And it's actually kind of expensive if you really want to license them legally. Like they say on Artlist.io, they say, oh, you can use these for whatever you want. And then you look in the license and it's like, actually, you can't for games. So you have to actually end up paying thousands of dollars to license out the sounds that you've decided to use. So to break it down for me, we use Unity. We use C#. It's just all the code is from scratch. We do use Blender. I would say Blender is top tier, even though it's open source. And I say this as a caveat for those of you who are like, no, I'd rather use a professional grade tool. No, Blender, even though it's open source and free, it's incredible. We use Substance instead of GIMP to paint our textures. And I say we, me and my 3D artist, Felipe. He actually does the majority of the custom models, whereas I flip the models, flip other models. And then we use Photoshop instead of GIMP. So hopefully everybody can see that there's a variety of different tools, yet they can end up creating something that's similar. in flavor and in tone and quality. The debate of the everlasting debate of Unreal Engine and Unity, there are merits to one being better than the other, but I'll just say to people, maybe you disagree with me here, but I think the majority of us game developers shouldn't get too lost in the weeds and should just pick something and move forward. Assuming 100%. Unity's pricing model is going to stay the way it is, which that's a big if, but we'll see. Cool. Does that break down the tools, you think?
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, I've used Audacity a little bit here and there for some audio editing, for some small things.
Which is free.
Which is free, yeah. But that's about it.
Cool.
That's about it. Cool. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to launch. We don't have to talk about specific numbers, but I just love to hear how launch went for you. What was preparing launch like? Were you nervous? Were you scared? And how did it go?
Yeah, so I was definitely nervous. I think the biggest thing that I was worried about leading up to launch was just the player reception. It's like it had gotten enough attention prior to launch. I launched with 550,000 wish lists. So
holy crap.
It's like I knew that people were going to buy it. I just was really worried as to whether or not they would like it and if they would be pleased with their purchase. So that was the biggest thing that I was nervous about going into it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think the launch was about as chill as it could have been. Pretty much, I am a big fan of like tools down like a month before launch. I want to be like have a solid build that's completely done, the build that I'm going to publish, and sit on it for 1 month. Now that doesn't mean I'm just sitting around for a month. Yeah. That means that last month there is spent just strictly doing tons of marketing stuff, making trailers, making videos, writing up press releases, getting lists of influencers to send keys to. It's a busy time leading up to launch, just getting all of the just that hype machine rolling.
Yeah.
And being able to do that without having to worry about the game at all, and just knowing that it's in a solid state, just polish-wise and everything. That's very important to me. So as soon as I was done with, getting all of the marketing stuff done, and I got all my posts scheduled out, and everything was ready, keys were out. I sent keys out, I think, 2 weeks before launch, so YouTubers had plenty of time to fit it into their schedule and cover it on their channels. So the number of people that covered it just on day one was phenomenal. It was outstanding. Yeah. And I think a big part of that was just because I gave them plenty of time, Okay. So, leading up to launch.
Really quick to give people some clarity, those of you who are thinking, okay, how many do I send? First off, can we get what should developers aim for with wish lists? And you don't have to answer because a lot of times it's difficult to answer this question. How many wish lists should developers aim for when they launch their title? And I'll give you a specific metric to aim for if they want to go full time. So let's say $50,000. Let's say they want to make $50,000 from a launch. How many wish lists do you think they should aim for?
So this is a question where I have a bit of a unconventional answer to it. Most people will be like, oh, you want to get 10,000 wish lists, and then you'll be on the front page or something like that. Honestly, I think the whole like wish list count metric is way overhyped in game development. It's way overhyped. And here's why though. Obviously, a game that has 500,000 wish lists is going to do better than a game that has 10,000 wish lists. Like, there are general indicators, but I think a lot of people, when they hear like, oh, I need 10,000 wish lists, what they'll do is they focus on like the number itself rather than how efficiently they're getting to the number. If it takes you 10 years to hit 10,000 wish lists, you've got a problem. Your game's not going to do well. You are going to fail. But if you get 10,000 wish lists in 3 months,
gotcha,
you could have $1 million launch. Or maybe not that much. But it's really about the velocity of the wish list. It's about how easy it is for you to get them. That's going to indicate like your conversion rates. Because if it takes you a lot of work to get to 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever your target is, if you have to go to every festival, if you've got to do 5 trailers, if you've got to get a publisher and make devlogs and get millions of views just to get to that number, you might not have a great converting game.
Could it be that how do I ask this? Could it be that it's not necessarily that your game isn't, let's say it takes a year to get 5,000 wish lists or 10,000 wish lists. Could it be that you're just a terrible marketer and your game is actually good? Like you just don't have a good trailer, or you don't have a good videos or GIFs or screenshots?
I mean, it could be.
Yeah.
It could be. Usually if a game is good, it'll be pretty easy to market. Like if a game is marketable, it's easy to market it. That's kind of the whole point of it. But if you're using like Windows Movie Maker default transitions in your trailer, that could be a problem. That could be a problem. So it's like if you're marketing at a competent level and you're still not getting attention, or it's very difficult to get that attention, then you've got a problem. And that 10,000 count or whatever count doesn't matter much.
The GDD, correct me if I'm wrong here, the GDD is the foundation to everything, because the GDD contains your hook. It contains the thing that's going to make the game marketable. So in your instance, you've got this GDD, and you've got this great idea of a spider train. That right there is why your marketing material just naturally was successful without much effort. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a bad idea, you can't put lipstick on a pig. That's kind of
exactly.
You've got to have a good idea. And so the idea generation is core to everything. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So launch. One more question. In terms of how many people, because I'm not thinking about for me. I'm really thinking about for my audience, because I know what I think how many I would send. How many emails or how many keys do you send out to streamers?
So, again, this is one where I don't have a specific. So I think I had a list of, I think like 300 on launch, 300 or 400. And then I sent out a lot more just by request on just like on Twitter and by email. So, and that list was mostly built up throughout development. If I'd see somebody on, and I guess this might not be a common scenario for people, but if you see YouTubers on Twitter that like, maybe they like one of your posts about your game, or they retweet something, or they mention your game in a video, or anything like that, then I would add them to this list and be like, okay, this is a warm contact. This is not somebody that I'd just be randomly cold calling. They've heard of the game. They maybe have some interest in it. So I'll be sure to send them a key when the game comes out. So about 300 people that I found made it onto the list ahead of time. And then probably another 100 or 200 people got keys that would just DM me on Twitter or something. So, I think for most people, I would just aim to send keys out to as many relevant channels as you can. And when I say relevant, I don't mean like, just target the big channels. I mean like targets channels that cover similar games.
Yep.
So like one tactic that I think is really good is find a game that did pretty well on YouTube that's similar to your game, that's in a similar genre, stuff like that. Just look it up on YouTube and find all the YouTubers that played that game. Yeah. And, you can add them to your list. And that would be a good way to find people that might be interested in, covering your game as well.
And, they'll also play it in a passionate way, it's great marketing material. It's like if you want to get favorable coverage from somebody who's really enjoying the game, so hopefully that translates to clicks and purchases. So you don't want to just because PewDiePie gets a ton of views or Markiplier gets a ton of views doesn't mean you want Markiplier to play your game. Not necessarily. Granted, Markiplier, he would probably pretty great for anybody. But
Yeah.
it's just good to keep in mind. And also, I like to think of it as like climbing a ladder. If you're only trying to get the top tier YouTubers, pretty much all of them are going to probably say no, especially if you're making sort of a decent game, but it's not the most viral. They're really looking for a game, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they're really looking for a game that's going to get them views too, right? They want views.
Yeah,
and so they're going to pick a game that comes across well in a video and has that fun factor, that shock factor, that viral factor. So if you're not getting all these bigger YouTubers, then start small and hopefully you'll climb that ladder. And because a lot of small YouTubers, they know each other, right? So they're going to start sharing content, and they'll see, oh, this video that this person who had 30,000 subscribers, it's got 100,000 views. So I'm going to play that game too. And so it just slowly starts stacking, and hopefully you can climb that ladder. Whereas in your case, I think you got, what were some of the top tier YouTubers that played your game pretty much immediately?
Yeah, I mean, there were quite a few. Markiplier, Corey Kenshin. I think Jacksepticeye played it fairly soon. I don't think he was a day like in the first weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, FGTB. I mean, pretty much. I mean, most of them.
Right.
Most of them. A lot of the large channels.
And you know, it's one of those things, man. It's like I want my audience to feel encouraged here. You don't necessarily have to have this massive viral game for someone like Jack to play your game. There are other ways to figure out how to get Jack to play, because I was able to get Jack to play Pinstripe and Neversong, both of my games, but it was a different way. It wasn't that I just said, here's a viral game, go play it. I actually reached out to him personally and asked him to be part of the game. So sometimes you can get YouTubers to participate in the creation of the game, which then makes them want to play the game, right? If they have a playable character and an NPC in the game, they'll be more likely to play it. So sometimes you got to be creative to stand out and get YouTubers to play your games. But other times, like you said, it's as simple as just a great idea on the GDD, and that's why they wanted to play it, because of a spider trick.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And by the way, just a note on what you just mentioned there. Back, I don't know, sometime a few years back, you made a video where you talked about that specifically, where if you ask YouTubers to participate in your game, they might be more on board to try it out when it launches. And I took that tip and applied it to My Beautiful Paper Smile.
Oh, cool.
And that's how I got some of the larger YouTuber coverage.
Oh, really?
For,
what did you do?
For that game. So I worked with 8-Bit Ryan, and I did a hand-drawn portrait of him in like this really creepy style.
Yeah.
And I put that as like just a picture in the game that players could find and look at.
Yeah.
And he saw that. I emailed him, and he was like, "Yo, that looks great.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Let's put it in the game." So I did that, and then he played the first chapter of it
That's
a little
cool.
later on when it launched. And then I did that with a couple other folks as well, Gerbeegly, Mr. Craven, some other channels kind of in that sort of horror space. So that's a tactic that works.
It is, man.
I don't know. I kind of hate saying tactic, right? Because it sounds like you're like taking advantage of people, but it's just one of those things where like if you make people a part of it, like it's a cool thing.
Well, no, it's not only that you're just what's the word? It's not that you're schmoozing them. It's that you're saying, hey, you can use the title "I'm in this game," which is going to get clicks.
Right.
So they're thinking, oh, I'm in this game. I could put it as a thumbnail, and I could say I'm in this game, and that's going to get me clicks. Therefore, I will play this game.
Right. It's like ideally, it's a mutually beneficial kind of
100%, and that's okay. That's what marketing is. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's about partnering with people and giving them a reason to partner back with you. So there's a variety of ways to get streamers to play your games. So that's cool that worked. And one final note here is, it sounds like you took the initiative to go ahead and do it and put them in your game before you even asked their permission. Is that correct?
Yes. So what I would do is I would draw the image of them, and then when I first contacted them, I'd say, "Hey, I've got this idea. This is what it would look like in game," and then all that they need to do is just say yes or no. I don't need to. It's like you want to remove as many steps as possible. So if I reached out to them, I was like, "Hey, I've got this game. Can I make a picture of you?" Then they're like, "Well, I don't know how this is going to look. I don't know what this person is like to work with. Are they going to just start spamming me constantly? If you just do it all, I mean, and it is a little bit more work ahead of time, and it can be a little bit of a risk. If they don't respond, you might be putting time into something that's not going to necessarily net you anything in the long term. But ultimately, I think it's the best option, because then all they have to do is say, yeah, looks good. Feel free to put it in, and it makes it really simple for them.
Yeah, and hopefully they've got the Steam key as well, and the embargo of
for sure.
Okay, cool. So I'm in this game. I can play this game. I got the Steam key. I can play it on May 1st. And so they either put it on their upload calendar, or they send it to their secretary or their PA or whoever, or their scheduler, their producer. And then they're ready to go. They didn't even have to respond to your email, and then you can just cross your fingers and hope they play. Cool. Okay, so yeah, let's wrap this up here. So how did the launch go? How did you feel?
Yeah, so the launch, ultimately, it went well. I'd say, so the player reception was way better than I was expecting. I was expecting maybe like an 80% user review score on Steam. That's kind of what I was hoping for. I was like, if any less than 80, I'm going to feel kind of bad. Like I kind of didn't meet the expectations. It ended up day one kind of settling in at 92%.
Whoa.
And it's stayed consistent at that consistently for the past year.
Gavin, why did the press do what they did? I don't.
Yeah.
Am I correct in saying
the press reception was very poor?
What was that? It's almost like
I'm not sure.
I don't like the gaming press, the gaming industry. I don't like the press when it comes to the gaming industry, because it seems like they want to be negative when everyone's expecting something the opposite. So it's like it's clickbait. So it's like, Choo-Choo Charles has 500,000 wish lists. It's this huge success story. Everybody's so excited about it. Gavin's launched his game, and the press is like, yeah, let's crap all over this so we can get clicks. That's how it felt.
And it could be. I really don't know. At the end of the day, I think the biggest thing that's odd to me still is just that press covered it. Press doesn't usually cover games like this. It's not really a common thing. Like,
what do you mean by games like this?
Well, it's a meme game. It's a goofy game. It's a game that's just made to be fun, over the top, weird, solo developed. It's not really. It's not like a AA title or something.
I see. And they treated it like it was.
Right. Yeah. That was. I mean, it was a lot of. Like in the IGN one, they were complaining that it felt low budget. It's like, bro, I started making this. I was completely broke. I had no money. Like, what did you want me to do? Just like go grab a loan for $1 million? Like, you can't just do that. That's not how it works. Yeah. So a lot of the, some of the criticisms did feel very misplaced. It didn't seem like a game that they should be covering in the first place. So I'm not really sure what that was about. But ultimately, I knew that it didn't really matter much. The player reception was good, and that was what really mattered to me. I wasn't expecting a good critic reception. I was kind of expecting it to be on the lower end. Yeah. Anyways, so but
it's got like almost like a lot of horror movies experience this. It's like I didn't go into a horror movie to experience some epic drama. I went in to have fun, and that was all it was for. And so this is why horror movies always get terrible reviews, because you've got a critical analysis, and it's like the audience is not looking for that. They just want to have fun. And I think that that's what your game really had. It had the fun factor, and that's what you leaned into, as opposed to making it some art house experience or some cinematic experience.
Right. It's definitely not a game that's made for critics. Some games are made for critics, and they're made to get a good review from critics. And that's a route that you can go. But it's just not, it just wasn't the target for this one.
Gotcha.
So the reception ended up being better than I expected, from like a user review side of things. The game got, I think, like 100 million views across social media on launch day, which was incredible. It was 50 million. I know 50 million on TikTok. And then, I don't know the exact figure on YouTube, but it was quite a few.
I hate you, man.
I'm sorry.
That's just I'm so jealous.
I'm sorry.
No. I'm kidding.
But,
I think it's just amazing what you've done. That's so cool. Are you willing to disclose copies sold? Not numbers, but just
not.
Okay.
Well, yeah, because copies that's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
It peaked at over 4,000, just over 4,000 concurrent players. That's public info. You see that on SteamDB, and it was the number 4, I think number 4 top selling game globally on launch day. So I don't know what games it was behind or above, but so it was good. It was good for sure.
Man.
Trying to think of other launch day stuff. I mean, for the most part, when launch day came around, I was able to just sit back and relax. You know, I was able to just kind of sit back, watch everything kind of unfold. You know, I spent a lot of time in the leading months just working on fixing bugs, so I knew I wasn't really going to have a buggy launch, and there was nothing major that came up post-launch that I had to, rush to fix. I tested it with hundreds of people on different machines, different specs, so it was very smooth. It went very smoothly, and I was able to just kind of sit back, watch it, and
So let's see here. We got 3 minutes here. I'll end with this here. Did you take a break? Did you find it difficult to want to do another game? Did you just want to essentially retire?
I wouldn't say I wanted to retire. I couldn't if I wanted to. It hasn't done that well. But yes, I was definitely enjoying the break that I took. So for the probably first couple weeks after launch, I pretty much didn't do anything with the game, or much of anything at all. I basically just watched gameplay videos,
made plushies,
got more sleep, stuff like that. And I think it was probably about a month later that I started kind of casually just more starting to learn about how to deal with the success of it, learning a bit more about just finances, taxes, investing, just all this kind of stuff, figuring out business structures, what's the best business structure long term, and how can I do it. It was a lot of just restructuring and reformatting just within just my life in general. And I was enjoying it. I didn't miss game development, if I'm being completely honest. I was pretty burnt out by the time I finished that game. And about 6 months later, this past July is when I first started being I kind of want to work on a game again. I kind of want to start getting into a new project. So
you going to build a team, or are you going to keep... Nope. Stay solo,
No team. Staying solo for this next project. I'm still not opposed to working with a team someday, but I'm still not quite confident enough in my abilities to put a lot of money behind a project, because a lot of people don't realize hiring people is expensive. I mean, you would know this. It's costly. It's costly to get just 5 people involved for a couple of years on a project. So staying solo for now. It's just more peace of mind for me personally. Less risk, less to worry about.
My team will tell you, it's because they can just observe me as a team leader. It's stressful because not only are you paying people's bills, you're providing. Well, they're doing the work, but you got to make sure that you've got cash to pay for it, and you're paying for their families and their livelihoods. So you got to respect that. So there's pressure.
It's a lot of responsibility.
But there's an emotional side to leading a team, which is you can't just change things all the time because people are going to get exhausted. You can't just have a random idea and try it. It's no, you got to respect the work that your team has put in on your other ideas, and you've got to be a lot less reactive, and be much more. You got to build a culture of respecting each other's talents and the work they've put in. And so that's difficult because my instinct is to be reactive and impulsive with what I create. And that can be a wonderful way to be an artist because you can create some really cool, interesting stuff. But when you've got a team, you can't do that. You've got to be a lot more respectful of people. Okay,
yeah,
well,
it seems like a completely different skill set.
100%, 100%. It's well, I'll be honest with you, man. I spend the majority of my time inside of ClickUp, which is it's like Monday.com or Trello. I spend the majority of my time inside of ClickUp or Discord. And I opened up Unity yesterday for the first time in a long time, and I live streamed, and I just almost felt like crying because I just love it so much. I love developing. And so I told my team yesterday, I said, all right, guys, I'm gonna be participating. I said, guys, I miss participating in this. Can I join? Can I come back into the fold? So that's what I'm going to be doing for the foreseeable future, which is just getting back into Unity. I really missed it. So, yeah.
Nice. That'll be cool.
Oh, yeah. Okay, man. Well, anything you wanted to leave people with about your next game, where they can find you, or anything like that?
Yeah, well, my next game is completely secret, and I can't say anything about it.
I figured.
But if you want to see some stuff about it, when I do start talking about it and announce it, you can follow me on YouTube at 2star, Twitter at 2star Games. That's about it.
Yeah, links in the description, guys.
And subscribe to Thomas. Yeah,
sure. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, subscribe to 2Star Games. You'll learn a ton, guys, about not only game development, but also Gavin's just a brilliant YouTuber and marketer. You'll notice that my views are about 1/10 or 100th, maybe even 1,000th of his views, and that's because he's got the it factor. So be sure to check out Gavin below. Gavin, thanks for your time, man. This was great.
It was a great conversation. Thank you for having me on.
You bet, dude. Take it easy. Cheers. Hey guys, just a quick interruption here, if that's okay. I quickly wanted to just remind you about your free gift that's below. It's a thank you for listening to this podcast. It includes my free 3D course, which is going to teach you how to quickly make your first 3D game, but also a 2D game kit. And I used this exact game kit to make a game for PewDiePie in just 14 days. The bonus on top is my free course on how to secure 6 figures in funding before you even finish your game. Click the link in the bio or the description. Just be sure you keep this running, so open in a new tab if you can, and download those free gifts. There's no gimmicks here. I just want to see you succeed.